You killed him!
No, I did not.
I gave him life.
There's a moment in Reanimator where on first meeting Meg Halsey, Herbert West gives her this look. This weird, autistic look that can mean any number of things. Is he attracted to her? Is he sizing her up as a threat? Is he calculating how much reagent it would take to reanimate her dead body? What's great about this moment is that it's subtle, it's ambiguous, but then the movie gives you so many dramatic clues for reasonably interpreting it. There's a lot of moments like that in Reanimator. Lines of dialogue laced with double meaning, brief gestures or facial expressions that communicate more than some movies do in their entire runtime. Even the simple act of Herbert West adjusting his socks is for some reason incredibly compelling to me. Look at this goofball. Look at the way this goofball adjusts his socks. It's all the little things, the subtle character details that add real weight to Reanimator's more bombastic moments of blood and guts mayhem. The film probably could have coasted to B-movie success on the merits of those gory set pieces alone, but the fact that it all takes place in the context of this real and convincing interpersonal drama is what really elevates it into something more. All the major players, even before the blood and guts start flying, each have some sort of bone to pick with one another. Dan is a young medical student who wants to marry Meg, but Meg is afraid of complicating things with her father, who also happens to be dean of the university. Dr. Hill, one of the professors at the university, has a weird obsession with Meg and sees Dan and Meg's father as an obstacle, while Herbert West looks down on Dr. Hill and his theories about brain death and sees Meg as an impediment to him and Dan in their scientific pursuits. All of these elements are already in play so that when things do go off the rails, these aren't just blank slates reacting to extreme events, but well-realized characters whose actions are motivated by jealousy, lust, ego, and ambition. Director Stuart Gordon, as well as much of the cast, had a long background in theater, and there were 3 weeks of rehearsal before filming that really seemed to pay off, because everyone does seem to have a real chemistry between them. Everybody's bringing something to the table. That said, the standout here is, of course, Jeffrey Combs.
West. Herbert West.
Jeffrey Combs. What more can be said about Jeffrey Combs? What an actor, what a legend. Some people know him from Star Trek, others from Reanimator. Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West is broad and theatrical while still maintaining all the aforementioned subtleties. His small stature and generally mild-mannered appearance is disarming at first, so that when he does start throwing his weight around, his hubris strikes as all the more incredible. He's a little dog with a loud bark. The thing about Herbert West, though, is that his arrogance isn't undeserved. You try reanimating the dead. Part of what makes West so relatable is that everyone, to some extent, would love to be that person who refuses to compromise. There's a real earnestness about Herbert West. He's so single-minded in his scientific pursuits that most pretense falls by the wayside.
How can you teach such drivel? These people are here to learn, and you're closing their minds before they even have a chance.
What are you here for, Mr. West?
You know, you should have stolen more of Gruber's ideas, then at least you'd have ideas.
Mr. West!
I think everybody's known someone or has had a friend like Herbert West, that guy who either doesn't quite understand certain social cues or maybe does but outright ignores them. When Herbert responds to Dan's notice looking for a roommate, he's already dead set on moving in. Then later, when Meg finds her cat dead in West's refrigerator, he somehow has the stones to make it all about her being in his room.
What are you doing in my room? How dare you come in my room?
Dad!
I thought I was renting a private room, Dan.
According to West, he's the one being imposed upon. Having Meg's cat dead in his refrigerator, that's just a small detail. She's in his room. No girls allowed. If in most social situations West is above pretense, when confronted by danger, he defaults to ambiguity, subterfuge, and manipulation, such as when Dan discovers his serum.
What the hell is this?
That is none of your business.
Yeah, I think it is
Just as this is none of my business that you're sleeping with Dean Halsey's daughter.
Well, I think Dr. Halsey just might understand.
Huh, do you? Well, you may well be right. Are you sure you want to find out?
There's also the question of, is Herbert occasionally committing murder in order to further his experiments? Did he kill Dr. Gruber at the beginning of the film? Did he kill the cat?
It was dead when I found it. It knocked the garbage over and it got its head stuck in a jar.
Stuck in a jar, yeah right, buddy. Then again, maybe death just happens to follow Herbert West everywhere he goes. Maybe the man is a walking, talking bad luck charm. After all, he doesn't seem to be a completely heartless maniac.
Dan! Come on.
Oh, well, you'll be all right.
At the heart of Reanimator is the very complicated friendship between Herbert West and Dan Cain. If it's too much to call them friends exactly, they're at least confederates, brothers in arms, drawn together by similar goals and ambitions, haunted by the same nightmares. This is a movie about men. How often do you think about Rome? How often do you think about reanimating the dead? At first glance, Dan Cain and Herbert West seem like they should have nothing in common. What would Chad and this autistic dweeb be doing hanging out together? And yet, each in their own way cannot abide by their own powerlessness in the face of death. Each possesses the same drive for plunging into the depths of the unknown. But underneath it all, I do think they are friends. I think West is a guy who, as antisocial as he is, I think even he values having a friend, values someone to crack a few jokes with.
Look out!
I think Herbert really does admire Dan's sincerity, his idealism, his commitment. Dan stands in stark contrast to Dr. Hill, who West regards as a fraud, a plagiarist, and a dilettante. As for Dan being the idealist that he is of course compelled by the idea of overcoming death as one might any other disease. When Herbert West comes along with his reagent, he opens a Pandora's box of new medical possibilities. The thing about West is he has a way of revealing or sharpening people. He reveals Dr. Hill for the perverted plagiarist that he really is. He sharpens Dan's metal as both an idealist and a doctor, not without consequences, of course. Meanwhile, you can't talk about Herbert and Dan without talking about how Meg factors into their dynamic. Herbert and Meg become rivals for Dan's attention. When Meg looks at Herbert, her first instinct is, ooh, creepy, and so she tries to warn Dan away from him. Meanwhile, Herbert sees Meg, sees love and romance in general as a frivolous distraction. After all, what could be more important than life and death? Neither of them are wrong necessarily, it's more that each is part of an age-old battle between the sexes, men and women with different instincts, different priorities, going through different rites of passage. Dan Cain and Herbert West in their macabre pursuit to conquer death are like boys playing in their treehouse. Again, no girls allowed. Dan, for his part, tries to walk the line. He sticks up for Herbert against Meg, he sticks up for Meg against Herbert. He's a man poised between the call of the hunting lodge and the call of home and hearth, resulting in a twisted sort of compromise between the two when, at the end, Dan injects the lifeless Meg with Herbert's reagent. The sequel, Bride of Reanimator, elaborates on some of these themes a bit more, but that's a story for another time. In conclusion, Reanimator is a really good movie.